Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to my podcast where you can gain insight on my perspective. My name is Hayden, and this is episode 22 of a series called 24 Lessons I've Learned in My 24 Years of Life. I heavily value communication at this point in time in my life because at one point in time I was not the best at communicating, which was the number one leading cause of the failure of my partnerships in the past. A lot of it was on me, and it is beyond frustrating when somebody cannot communicate their needs, their wants, their emotions. Back in my previous partnerships, I didn't know how to communicate, and my friend at the time or partner at the time would tell me that I'm really bad at communicating, and that's something they really value, but they still love me and want to be friends with me or want to be with me, and they're like, that's something that you can work on, but it wasn't in a loving sense. It was usually at their breaking point of the point where I was not communicating well. I would trip up on my words, I would freeze up, I would not be able to say anything, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is awful. It's awful. I can only imagine what they're feeling right now because I haven't experienced being on the receiving end of somebody not being able to communicate like that until one day I was, and I was like, wow, this is beyond frustrating, and I need to give them grace and give myself grace because that is tough. That is really tough. And you don't know until you go through it of being with somebody who doesn't know how to communicate. And so when I was with somebody that didn't know how to communicate their needs, their wants, their desires, their anything really, and it was just a guessing game, which I'm not a big fan of guessing games. Like, I want you to tell me how you feel. I don't like guessing. And I don't like projecting. So you tell me how you feel and I'll support you through it, and we'll figure out what you need in that moment. A lot of the times I like to ask people, like, are you looking for a solution, looking to rant, looking for advice? Because we can take information the wrong way. It can upset the other person, and we don't want to do that. So communicating is very important. In the moment where I had to give myself grace and this other person grace, I did give this person as many opportunities that I could to communicate with me, and I was like, you know what, this actually isn't working. And then in that moment, I saw why my previous partnerships failed, and I was like, this is a big indicator that I still need to work on my communication. I have grown leaps and bounds since then and have just really been able to articulate like exactly what I want to say, exactly what I'm feeling. And a lot of the times it was me not wanting to express how I was feeling because I didn't want to hurt the other person, or I didn't want to make the other person feel some type of way. But a lot of the times it was from a standpoint of I was projecting onto them. I was thinking about what they were thinking, how they would take it, and I would just never say what I wanted to say because I would exhaust all the possible options of what they could be thinking about what I wanted to communicate with them. So then it led to me not communicating, led to them getting more frustrated over time, and then to their tipping point where the top blew, and that's when things would end most of the time. And since it was a reoccurring pattern, I clocked that, and I was like, all right, now's the time to really heavily focus on my communication and actively practice it in my day-to-day life. So I started with my friends, and I started communicating with them, just as some of them would communicate with me, their feelings, their emotions. And I was like, do I want to be this vulnerable? Let's try. And then I started expressing to my family a little bit. I don't like sharing every detail with people. So I was like, how do I do this without sharing everything that I'm thinking about right now? So then I went back to my favorite method of working through things, which is journaling. And I've been journaling nearly every single day since I was 15. That is something that has really helped me communicate better. That has really helped my mental health, because I would just write down a lot of things that I wanted to say if I was like angry or sad or upset or happy, any good emotion too. A lot of the times though, from being a teenager to a young adult, like I had a lot of anger, resentment, and some sad unresolved feelings. So I would journal and I would write everything out, and that way I wouldn't blow my top and say something I would regret, ruin a relationship or whatever. When you communicate genuinely, you can't ruin anything that's meant for you. You won't miss it. What's meant for you is meant for you. If your communication comes off the wrong way to somebody and that like ends a friendship, that friendship wasn't meant to work out. At least that's how I see things. Like I said, you guys are just gaining an insight on my perspective. That's something that's really worked for me, is learning that if I say something wrong, and if I feel it's wrong, first of all, I'll apologize. Then I will articulate what I truly want to say without it coming off in a way that's like not what I wanted to say. But yeah, learning how to communicate is such an important skill to have. Even on my resume, like my dad early on, like whenever he would help me write like my very first resumes, he would put great communication skills. I was like, why do I need to put that? Like people talk. He's like, you'd be surprised. And I was surprised. I was very surprised to see how there was a lack of communication in a workplace, out and about, in partnerships and relationships. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I thought, we're speaking English to each other, we're communicating, or we're speaking Spanish to each other, we're speaking a language to each other, we're communicating, but it's not all that. It's really not. It's so much more than that. And that is a big lesson that I had to learn. It was unfortunate that I had to learn after the fact that somebody was already extremely pissed off and frustrated, but that was the extent of a situation that could get my attention. Clearly, I kept missing the lesson over and over and over again, and it had to get to a point of where it needed to blow up in my face, which happened to a lot of lessons in the past, and I can see reoccurring lessons. I'll just address them head on at this point. I'm like, I see that lesson sneaking up on me. Let me just deal with it because I actually know how to deal with it. I know how to work through it. I see you the first time, girly. Like, I got it. Versus waiting and being like, no, what if it's something else? What if it's actually not that this time? Let me be naive, let me be in denial, and let me see how this plays out for funsies, for the plot. Let me do it for the plot. Then I learned my lesson over and over again. So there's so many lessons that I did not want to repeat to the extent that I had to repeat them, or that I chose to repeat them rather. That I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to communicate now. I think I'm ready for this. I think talking to people should be a lot easier than what it is now, and conversation should flow. And when things don't flow, it creates a block, and blockages hinder communication pathways, which makes things really frustrating. Take CrowdStrike, for example. That's something very recent that happened where an entire software system went down and many restaurants and businesses used that software. So those restaurants and businesses were down with their communications. They were unable to communicate to clients, customers, the public, their bosses. Like literally communication pathways were so shut down that day, it was making it so frustrating to even work and to talk to one another, because you're like, how is this even going to happen? And then AT&T, at least in the area I lived in, had something going on with it. Those phones weren't working, so they couldn't call people. People were late to work. People couldn't place orders. There's so much going on, and you could just see the utter chaos that lack of communication causes. And that is such a real example. But when you're talking to a person, the communication pathway being blocked could be an emotion holding you back. It could be fear holding you back. It could be anxiety holding you back. Those things don't control you. You're in control of them. Those are feelings and emotions within you. You know how to deal with those. But there's just times that it might feel easier to just let them ride out, And sometimes when we choose to let them ride out like that, it does ruin friendships and relationships for us. But like I said, at the end of the day, if those friendships and relationships don't work out, they weren't meant to work out anyway. You're being redirected. So keep that in mind. Whenever I'm at work with my coworkers, we try to communicate as much as possible, especially because we are all in like different positions in close proximity, and we're like, hey, behind you, hey, coming around you. My favorite thing, if I'm moving in a bunch of different directions within like seconds, I'm like, hey, I'm orbiting around you right now, just like look out, coming around you, I'm behind you, I'm beside you, on your left, on your right, walking, have something hot. If you work in a restaurant, you understand, because you also don't want to drop all the food that your chef just made. So same applies for even coffee shops. Working as a barista has improved my confidence and my communication skills tenfold. I truly don't think I would be the person I am today if I continued working jobs that I wasn't facing the public on a day-to-day basis. Like, I speak a lot to strangers. I speak a lot to the general public, and I have a lot of confidence doing so. There are some days that I am exhausted and it looks like that I don't want to converse with people, which might be true in that moment, but I always try to show up as my best self with my best communication skills. And if I'm not feeling good on communication that day, like, I will be in a position where I'm not going to be talking to people all day, because I don't want my lack of communication to upset somebody else. which I shouldn't be worried about that. But when you're at work, you're there not for yourself, you're there for other people. You're there to serve other people. You're getting paid to serve other people. So you got to show up as your best self. And if you're not, communicate that. Simple as that. If you're going to be late to something, communicate that. Whether that's to work, whether that's to a hangout, whether that's to a family event, whether that's to like a vacation. If you're running late, call me, beat me if you want to reach me. Communicating that is so simple, but you could start there. If you're a person that's not good at communicating at all, start somewhere simple. Start small. Start with the people you live with. If you live by yourself, start by talking on the phone. When you go to work, communicate. Start asking questions. Like if you just usually keep your head down and you're like little head nod or hi, hey. How about hi, how are you doing today? What's up? What's new with you? People love talking about themselves. Why not just ask a question that you don't normally ask and communicate? Just talking like that, you can articulate your words better. You can structure your sentences better. I've learned how to speak with more precision in my voice and have carried my confidence through that by talking to so many people every day. Sure, I get strung up on my words. I get caught up on them. I trip over them. I stutter sometimes and then I get a little nervous and then I'm back to it and the confidence comes back and I'm talking to people and I'm like, hey, how are you? Hey, how's your family? Hey, what are you up to today? Hey, you doing anything fun? By practicing that on a day-to-day basis, even if you go to a grocery store, I know it's gonna sound so weird because everybody's there to do their own thing. If you make eye contact with somebody that you're passing by and you don't say hi, I feel like that's weird personally, but there's a good like practice point to like say hi to somebody. Don't get me wrong. I say hi to multiple people 100 times a day at least. I say hi to my customers, whether they're paying attention or not. I'm like, hi, welcome in. Hi, good morning. Hey, how are you? There are so many like stone cold faces I've seen. They'll look right at me and say nothing. And I'm like, that's cool. That's fine. I don't care. But there's people that don't hear you, so they don't say hi back. There's people that literally will come in, get their mobile order and leave. They don't want an interaction at all, but some of them do. So I say hi regardless. I ask them how they're doing regardless. And that gives you practice. It also gives you practice with rejection because when a customer rejects your nice, kind gesture or your nice words, it's really funny because you're like, well, the previous person took it, so why didn't you? What the hell? And then you're like, okay, they got something going on. Not everybody is going to respond to you. Not everybody's going to pay attention to you. And that's also something to work through, which is nice. Serving the general public is an easy way to practice that. But if you're not, if you're at school, university, a workplace where there's a lot of people, practice looking people in the eyes and saying hello. Your confidence is going to skyrocket, let alone your communication skills. But when you communicate so frequently in a way that you can articulate exactly what you want to say and say it with some inflections like I'm doing now, it flows and there's no blockages. Sometimes I'll find myself being so tired of talking, kind of like how I'm getting now. I'll get so tired of talking that my voice inflection leaves and I was like, no, that's not how I wanted it to come across. I apologize. Let me rephrase. Let me try again. And then I'll get my point across the way I want it to come across because I can communicate that. I can communicate when I want to leave a friend's house. I can communicate when I want to leave an event. I can communicate, hey, I'm tired, I'm not feeling this today. Or I can communicate, I would love to go with you to that. Let's say, for example, you're in a partnership and there's something kind of rocky going on there. There's some tension. And I'm not talking about that good type of tension. I'm talking about there's some tension like you're walking on eggshells. You're like, okay, this is an uncomfortable tension. I gotta say something or maybe the other person needs to say something. I don't really know, but I'm also not gonna bring it up. That's when you should bring it up. That moment that you're like, I'm just not gonna talk about it, please. Bring it up. Even if you don't know how to articulate what you're feeling, what you're going through, or you don't even know why you're feeling it or why you're going through it, let the other person know. I've been in too many scenarios where I did not let a person know how I was feeling. I dreaded the rest of the day. I dreaded the rest of the relationship, the friendship, whatever, because I was like, I did not let this person know how I felt about whatever the heck was going on. So they don't know that, but I'm projecting in my head that they do know that because I'm setting this expectation in my head that they know, that they're inside my mind and that they know. Don't hold expectations like that, first of all. Communicate your expectations, your wants, your needs. Let that person know if something's bothering you. You're with a person for a reason. You're with a friend for a reason. So they're going to support you. And if they don't support you, what the hell are you friends with them for? Honestly, I cannot fathom not being able to communicate something with my friends at this point in time in my life. There have been multiple times that I have been too afraid to say something to my friends, scared or anxious to bring something up to them for the fear of how they would react or how they would feel or if I would make them uncomfortable by bringing something like this up. I've learned you can't control how other people react, so communicate what you need to communicate regardless. Whatever's supposed to happen will happen. There's nothing you can change about that. And a lot of the times we try to change the reaction that's going to happen. We try to control that, and it's a letting go of control. Let go of the control, allow whatever's meant to happen. It's going to flow regardless. I went back to asking people when they're like going on about something, they're communicating something with me, and I'm like, I'm the type of person that's very quick to like find a solution to things. Even if it's a temporary fix, my mind is in like fix it Felix mode a lot of the times. And I'm like, not everybody needs fixed because not everybody's broken. And also it's not my job to fix people. When I was a kid, I thought it was. That's a different story. Caught myself up in a lot of situations that taught me so many lessons, which is a lot of the lessons that are included in this podcast series. Yes, I did learn them as a teenager. So not everybody needs fixed. So that means they don't need solutions. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm very quick to give advice. Maybe they just need an ear. Maybe they just want somebody to hear them. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. And I was like, ooh, that sounds familiar because I like being seen and heard when I'm speaking. I don't want advice unless I ask for it. I'm like, hey, can you give me advice on this? Or, hey, what do you think a solution would be to this? I'll hear you out. But when it's unsolicited, I'm like, well, I don't want that. I really wish you could listen to me. And they're like, why didn't you just say that? People are going to be so much more understanding than you even know. A lot of the times when you're like, if you are upset about something and it's getting heated and you're like, I didn't even want advice. I just wanted this. And they're like, okay, why didn't you just say that? Because then I wouldn't have given you advice. I would have just been there and lent an ear to you. And that's how arguments happen. But I went back to saying that because for a while, like I said, like I was just giving advice left and right, or I was finding solutions to problems. I was constantly in go mode, fix it Felix mode, you know? Whoa, let me slow down. Let me actually take in what people are saying and not try to think of the next thing to say, not try to find a solution, not try to give advice right now. Because maybe that's not what they need in that moment. Because I know it's not what I need in most moments. So why would I project that onto somebody else, you know? A lot of the times it's looking back at yourself and realizing the things that you're not liking or not doing, and you're seeing somebody else either not like or not do what you did or didn't want to do. And you're like, okay, they're reflecting a part of me that I need to focus on, which is a really cool thing to recognize. Many people will go years without that awareness and it gets them into trouble. I know it did me. So we've moved past that. It still happens to the best of us, but we've grown, we're blossoming, we're blooming. We're in our blooming era. We've had a lot of growth and now we're blooming. I'm never done growing, I'll tell you that. I'm growing and learning every single day, and communicating is like top on my list to grow better at. Because there are still days where I catch myself regressing to my old ways and I stop communicating. I'm like, whoa, wait, whoa. Hey, we don't do that anymore. Remember? We communicate how we feel regardless of how the other person's gonna feel after we say something. And it's not that I ever have any malintentions when I'm like articulating my feelings or emotions or expressing myself. There are never any malintentions behind it. I usually just want somebody to hear me. But otherwise, like, I'll communicate that. Even somebody in my family recently, like, I asked them, I was like, do you want advice? Do you want a solution? Or do you just want somebody to listen to you? And they were like, I just want the validation. I want to feel seen. I want to feel heard. And I'm like, okay, I see you. I hear you. I feel you. I don't agree with you, but, like, I see and hear you, you know? But just say that, because I'm not a type of person that likes to argue or get in heated things. Like, I want to communicate, and when there is a lack of communication, it's beyond frustrating. Just like what I said at the very beginning of this, like, it's really frustrating when people are not able to communicate back and forth. But being aware is the first step, and taking action is the next. So sprinkle in these little tips throughout your day-to-day. Practice communicating with different people. If you're the type of person that's usually closed off, try opening up a little bit more. And you'll see people open up to you more, and do a little give and take. You'll learn how to communicate when you open up. And if you're already great at communicating, kudos to you, because that means you taught me stuff. But that also means that, you know, we've gone through the same lesson. Communication builds trust, honesty, and respect. And those are things I also heavily value in any partnership. And I'm sure many of you do as well. So just know that when you're not communicating stuff with your partner or with your friend, they can lose trust. And trust is something that's really hard to gain back, especially in my life. If I lose trust in you, it's really hard to gain back. You gotta build that shit back. So communication builds trust, honesty, and respect. And those are 3 things that I really value. And if you can't do any of those things, well, sayonara. Until you learn how to build trust, be respectful, and be honest, there's really no good communication between us, especially if it's one-sided. If you're in a friendship or relationship, or you have a colleague that is like very one-sided, like you're constantly communicating with them and they're not, or they're lying, or they're not respecting you and they're giving you reasons not to trust them, that makes communication really difficult. Keep doing you. But yeah, communication is key. Learn to communicate better. And like I said, if you're already great at communicating, kudos to you. Proud of you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's podcast episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope that you gained something from my little experiences that I shared. And I hope that by me sharing that, you know that you're not alone. Speaking of communication, I'm really tired of talking at this point. So I will catch you guys in next week's episode. I hope you have a wonderful week.